Hi everyone, and welcome to the next video on the Endgame series. This time we're going to look at the idea of the transformation of advantages, which is a very important theme in the Endgame. It was the third world champion, Jose Raul Capablanca, certainly one of the best ever players, who first formulated the principle of the transformation of advantages. The concept is that if you have one kind of advantage, you should always be on the lookout for ways to exchange it for another, even greater advantage. In the endgame, it often happens that you have some kind of advantage or a very nice position that you have to sacrifice in order to win, because simply sustaining the advantage is not enough to win on its own. The position before us here was reached by the brilliant Grandmaster Viktor Korchnoi in a game against an international master called Andrei Lukin in Stockholm 2003. The game is now at its 82nd move, and Korchnoi has been a pawn up for 60 odd moves without making further progress. Black should have good drawing chances here, but he has just played King G7, which is a bad blunder. If you want to try and spot the winning move that Korchnoi played, then stop the video now. Queen f6 check is the move, which is completely winning. Korchnoi exchanges his material advantage for a much more valuable one, the opposition, in a winning king and pawn endgame. Queen takes f6 is forced, anything else loses quickly. For example, if king f8, then queen takes c6, f takes c6, king f4, and the white king penetrates decisively, which black cannot avoid if he doesn't initiate the exchange of queens himself. So queen takes f6, e takes f6 check, king takes f6, and now the decisive move, king f4, which gains the opposition, the strength of which I've covered in earlier videos. Check out the Lessons from Capablanca playlist if you'd like to learn more. Now white is totally winning. King e6 is how Lukin continued. Playing instead king g7 is losing after king e5, again taking the opposition. If f6 check, now king e6, and it won't be long before the black pawns are falling and white queen's pawn wins. So king e6, now king g5, king e5, and f3, which is a very nice and accurate move from Korchnoi, which is bringing his opponent closer to Zugzwang. Note that none of the black pawns can move without material loss. If f6, then g6 is falling. And playing instead here f4 check allows black to draw after king e4. So f3 is a great move. Now came king e6 and only now f4, and here Lukin resigned because f5 is coming next and there'll be no way for black to stop the onslaught. For example, king e7, now f5, which is undermining the support of the h5 pawn. Play might go g takes f5, king takes h5, king f6, king h6, king e5, king g7, attacking the f pawn, so king e6, now h5, etc. And white wins. So it was a very nice game from Korchnoi and a great example of the transformation of advantages. Okay, on to our next example. The transformation of advantages can take several forms. In the last example it was a material advantage, and this example is more about the position as a whole. This game is 23 moves in and was played by the Danish Grandmaster Kurt Hansen against Ulf Andersson, another Scandinavian Grandmaster and a notable endgame expert, although he was outplayed here. Hansen's move with white here was the positionally minded a3, which is useful because it's placing the pawn on an opposite colour to that of his bishop here on d3, and thereby increasing the bishop's mobility and improving the overall position. White has an edge here thanks to his better bishop and also the e-file control and pressure on the black position. This move also anticipates the likely response d4, which Andersson played. So next came b4, rook takes c5, rook takes c5, d takes c3, queen takes c3 with the threat of discovered checks. So Andersson played king g8 because it could have been dangerous. Next came bishop c4, rook e8, attacking the rook, and queen g3, which is a very nice move that results in a good edge for white. The point is that there's now no rook takes e5 or its mate m4 with queen takes g6 check, and the f-pawn can't take, of course, because it's pinned by the bishop, and black only has two moves. If king f8, then queen takes f7 is mate, so king h8 is best, but it only delays the mate because now comes queen f6 check, king h7. If king g8, then it's made the same way with queen takes f7 check, king h8, and queen g8 is mate. So there's no rook takes e5 after queen g3. And what Anderson did play was bishop b5, which is defending g6 with the queen and hoping to exchange bishops. But now came a bishop d5 from Hansen, and after rook takes e5, queen takes e5. And here 8 moves from the position we began at, and white has managed to transform his advantage effectively. The character of the position has changed considerably, but nevertheless white retains good pressure and better pieces. Amongst other things, queen b8 check is threatened, which is going to win the b pawn. And in actual fact, black is more or less forced to give up a pawn here, after which it's really technique to grind home the win. Play continued with queen d8, which is really the best at black's disposal. If instead bishop c6 to defend the b pawn, now white wins with queen f6, pinning the bishop because of the discovered attack on the queen, and threatening queen takes g6 check once more, against which black is hopeless. Fritz gives a winning advantage to white in this position, well over 2 pawns ahead. So queen d8 is best. But now comes bishop takes b7, and black tries to get some counterplay, but it comes to nothing with queen d1 check, king h2, queen d2, and queen d3, offering the exchange of queens, which should be fine now because white's pawn up. So queen d6 check, g3, g5, bishop f3, king g7, king g2, queen f6, king h2, and bishop c6, which is offering the exchange of bishops and resulting in a fairly dire queen endgame, as white will have an outside pass pawn. It would have been better to keep the bishops on the board and force white to think up a winning plan some other way, because after bishop takes c6, queen takes c6 is relatively easy for white to win. Queen d4 check f6, now queen d3, h5, and queen d1, which is a nice move because it's preparing a4 and b5 with tempo, because it's attacking the h-pawn as well. So after king g6 comes a4, king h6, now queen b3, preparing the advance of these pawn majority on the king side. So h4, g takes h4, g takes h4, b5, a takes b5, a takes b5, queen c7 check, king g2, queen g7 check, king f1. And here Anderson resigned because he's run out of checks and there's no way now to stop the b pawn. So it was another fine example of the transformation of advantages, which is a powerful tool in the hands of an endgame player, both for practical playing reasons and also due to the added advantage of putting psychological pressure on the opponent, as just when they think they've solved the problem of the position, a new one arises in its place to give them more things to worry about. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave any comments or thoughts. Thanks very much.